What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Gamer Dad channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So it appears the developers are finally dropping the hammer on people that are cheating in the dark zone. One of the crazy things about the cheating in the dark zone issue is it's always been a problem. Since the Division 1, people have been shooting invisibly through walls and using all kinds of different hacks, but it appears somehow, some way, it's made its way into console. However it is they're doing it, I have no clue or any idea. But I think this highlights the problem that I've always seen that the Division had at its core, which was its attempt to almost always blend PvP and PvE in a way that was unnatural. It just could never really happen to provide some level of cohesion in the game overall. And I think fully we're going to see that after a while, this experiment will show up to have been a colossal mess overall. Now, I know that in this community, there are people who are dedicated PvP players or who favor the PvP side of things. And I personally, even though I'll go into Dark Zone, sometimes you see me PvP, maybe you can count it all together on one hand. I do lean or have a slant bias against the fact that the PvP in the Division 2 has elements that tie into the PvE. Now, this is something that I'll always say, and I'm sure somebody one time said, "Oh, I can't believe you're biased. That's so bad." I'm like, well, I know you're the most objective person in the world, so maybe you might have to teach me how to remain 100% objective every single time. Now, also, there's a player base that enjoys playing the game overall as a whole. The PvE and the PvP, to them, encompasses the entire gaming experience for the Division. I think this is what the Division developers actually wanted. They wanted the entire community to enjoy the overarching theme of their game, but it didn't work out that way. I think there are elements that deterred that, elements like you grinding, farming, wanting your rewards, and then not wanting to lose them in a place like the Dark Zone. And so all of those things came to a huge collision, a huge conflict that right now has seen people in the Dark Zone pretty much ruining that experience for everyone else. And this event of banning these folk right now is kind of weird to me because all these issues have been happening. People have been using all kinds of glitches on console, and nothing really happened at that time because resources were dedicated to the overall game. And you could even tell, you didn't need to be a rocket scientist, that the developers had to, in a sense, maybe focus their attention more on PvE rather than do so for PvP, because in this entire conversation, you think about it, the PvE side of the game is the more popular side of the game. I used to have this argument all the time, but it seems nobody actually disagrees with me after maybe 4 years into the whole cycle and us seeing multiple PvE content updates. I think right now it's a no-brainer in case of arguing in that direction. And this is, in my opinion, made PvP to suffer. It's not that I want PvP to suffer, it's that I feel like the devs should have actually made the conscious decision of separating their PvP and PvE so well that one mode would not have to suffer in any direction. And then you also think about a few other things in this whole conversation, and it brings it down to the developers possibly needing an outlet to be able to allow for their game have an identity of some kind, and the admission that the Division's premise for PvP is probably not the most popular, nor is it the most exhilarating PvE or PvP experience anyways for a broader audience. This is one of the things about niche games and niche modes or niche aspects of a video game. The commercial aspect is what many of these companies are going to pursue. In 2016, when the Dark Zone first appeared, it was, in my opinion, one of the most unique aspects of any video game. There is no doubt about that. The problem is it wasn't too popular in its premise. And since then, you can barely find any studio that's actually doing PvP the way the Division wanted to do its own sandbox. And that's because the overall game is a grindy game, a game where you have to work very hard to get all the loot that you have to get. You fight against the RNG, and then you go into a place like the Dark Zone. You fight against the RNG. You finally get the one item that you need, that you've been looking for a long time, and then pow, somebody shoots you through the wall, or a group of 4 people gank you, which is highly unfair. and take your item from you, and many times they do it just to grief you. This premise has failed, and we have to call it exactly what it is. If we ever see another large-scale Division game, I can almost bet 50 cents with you that it's not going to have a dark zone in this particular fashion. It will probably have something different, and I think this is where the Division Heartland might be coming into. For those of you that are PvP players, forgive me as I say this because, well, don't forgive me. Get mad at me if you want to. That's fine too. But this is the reality that we've come to see, and I wished we actually presented this reality earlier. It seemed like the optimistic side of us was failing to recognize exactly what the problem was. So you think about it and you say, okay, you want Division to have a successful PvP, framework. Well, it has to execute its PvP like other games out there that have a successful PvP framework. And I think this is where Heartland is coming into the equation. And so far, so good. If Heartland's able to actually stick with this premise, it'll be interesting to see how all of that goes through. So the PvP experiment and the Dark Zone experiment in the Division, to me, I don't think in its current form is viable. The question now that we have to ask is, if we ever get a Division game, how is Ubisoft Massive going to be able to pull it off if they decide, okay, in our next Division game, we actually want a Dark Zone, we actually want a PvP mode? They would have to go ahead and rework a lot of things and from the ground up build the game in a way where the PvP itself is very much separated from the PvP with very minimal overlaps. Right now, the integration of PvP and PvE is way too much, and for you to be able to get your PvP very well working, you have to actually give it some parameters that are in a sense unnatural to the PvE flow of the game, and it doesn't seem likely that they're going to make a more PvP focused game. They did that in a Division 1, and as much as many people swore that it was the best PvP experience ever, tried to tell y'all that that premise is not, in a sense, very attractive to a broad audience. What you're going to create is a lot of griefing, a lot of toxicity, and even force people into the position where they're having to play the game with people who don't care for all of those different rules that are there. That's the cheaters. I hope Massive continues to ban them, though, and really drop the hammer on them and go berserk at this point in time, because if they're not right now measured, if they're not actually contained, they're going to go ahead and try to ruin games like Division Heartland, and we don't want to see that carry itself over in there. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. What do you think about the PvP experiment for Tom Clancy's The Division 2 and its current implementation? Has it been a success, or is it going to require a lot more work or a lot more tweaking in order for them to ever realize a more pristine version of it? Thanks for watching the video, and hopefully we'll talk soon. Peace out.